Welcome, councillors. Welcome, everyone, to the July meeting of the Shire of Mount Alexander Council. And welcome everyone who joins us. And I acknowledge former councillor Petrusma joins us tonight. Welcome. To start the official proceedings, I acknowledge that we're meeting on Jara country, of which the members and elders of the Jara community and their forebears have been custodians for many centuries and have performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation, and renewal. We acknowledge their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region. Council meetings are audio and video recorded and are made available to the public via electronic media, including YouTube. All councillors are present tonight, so Councillor Maddock, Councillor Maltby, Councillor Cordy, Councillor Anir, Councillor Hastwell, Councillor Walker and Councillor Driscoll, and myself, Councillor Hayden. So we have no apologies or leave of absence. Do we have any declarations of interest or conflicts of interest, councillors? No. Okay, so item 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillor Maltby.
I'll move that the minutes of the meeting and confidential meeting of the Mount Alexander Shire Council held on the 16th of June 2026 be confirmed.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cordy. All those in favour and against, and that's carried. Now, under item 5, acknowledgements, it's with sadness that we note the passing of 2 councillors from neighbouring councils, Chris Meadows-Taylor from Central Goldfields, former mayor, and a relatively new councillor from Greater Bendigo, Councillor Donna Nicholas. Councillor Hastwell, would you like to read an acknowledgement for Chris Meadows-Taylor, please?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, it's my privilege to read this acknowledgement. In acknowledgement of the passing of Chris Meadows-Taylor. The Mayor, councillors and staff at Mount Alexander Shire Council extend our sincere condolences to the Meadows-Taylor family, including Chris's partner, Frank, following the passing of Central Goldfields Shire Council former Mayor Chris Meadows-Taylor. First elected as a councillor to the Central Goldfields Shire Council in 2005 and Mayor in 2007, Mr Meadows-Taylor completed his 6th term as Mayor in November 2022. Mount Alexander Shire councillors and staff worked with Mr Meadows-Taylor on numerous projects and initiatives. As former chair of the Central Goldfields Tourism Executive, he played an active leadership role in the Victorian Goldfields World Heritage Listing bid, supported by partnerships across neighbouring local governments and regional tourism boards. And I will just mention that outside of my role as councillor here at Mount Alexander Shire, I also previously worked at Central Goldfields Shire Council and had tourism in my portfolio, amongst other things, and Chris's leadership and strategic vision and enthusiasm and generosity made a huge difference to the accomplishments there and the legacy going on. He was also very known for his kindness and his generosity, and known for the eagerness he had to mentor a whole range of other people in the community, politicians, other councillors. It didn't really matter which walk of life you came from. Chris was absolutely there, ready and very willing. He also had a particular commitment to bettering the futures of young people. So Mount Alexander Shire Council acknowledges Chris's outstanding contributions, and our thoughts are with his partner Frank, his family and his community.
Thank you, Councillor Hastwell. And Valet Councillor Donna Nicholas, the Mayor, councillors and staff at Mount Alexander Shire Council extend our sincere condolences to the Nicholas family. following the recent passing of City of Greater Bendigo Councillor Donna Nicholas. Councillor Nicholas had a commitment to serving her community and representing the residents of the City of Greater Bendigo's Lockwood ward. Councillor Nicholas was elected in a by-election fairly recently, and I had the good fortune to meet Donna at the World Heritage at a World Heritage bid meeting in Bendigo, and what a wonderfully engaging and lively councillor Nicholas was. Mount Alexander Shire Council acknowledges Donna's contributions, and our thoughts are with her family and community. So item 6, public time. So we have some. Oh, indeed. Thank you, Chief.
I'll move the suspension of standing orders, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maltby. We have a second. Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. All those in favour and against? Thank you, councillors and CEO. So we have some pre-submitted questions for public time, and I'll invite anyone who might want to address the meeting from the floor, but I'll just read out some of the relevant question time rules. So each speaker in addressing the council will generally be limited to one question and allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Secondly, she'll extend due courtesy and respect to the council and the processes under which it operates. 3, she'll take direction from myself as chair of the meeting whenever I call upon a speaker to do so. And 4, she'll not attempt to enter into discussion or debate with council. However, councillors may ask questions of clarification of the speaker. Public question time is minuted. Therefore, state your name clearly, state if you are representing a group or organisation, and state in a few words what you wish to raise. Also note that in accordance with clause 12.1.5 of the governance rules, which deals with what sorts of questions can be asked of council, questions of council may be on any matter except if it, and I'll read out clause 9, relates to a planning matter already listed on the council meeting agenda. Now, there is one such item on the meeting agenda, and that's to do with the planning application for Camp Reserve. So I have 2 pre-submitted letters, which I can't read out because they are about that topic. However, I have one not on a planning matter. Is Lawrence Abukata here tonight to read his question? Okay, I'll read the question. Lawrence asks, my question concerns consistency, council resources and equal treatment of communities. In late 2023, council staff approached Free Palestine Central Victoria about mediated dialogue with unnamed Jewish residents concerned about Palestine rallies. FPCV, that's Free Palestine Central Victoria, did not refuse. It asked who requested the meeting, its purpose, agenda, and whether mediation was offered to other groups. Council later confirmed it had no evidence of refusal and acknowledged that dialogue had already occurred between FPCV and Jewish residents. Despite this, FPCV was misrepresented in the Castlemaine mail by anonymous residents. Council used staff time and resources to address concerns about Palestinian expression, yet when Arab, Palestinian and allied residents raised Gaza, anti-Palestinian racism and anti-Arab racism, Council moved towards a positions policy permitting it to abstain from international, federal and state matters. Their concerns were effectively excluded as too political. Freedom of Information material confirms that Mayor Toby Hayden attended the Victorian Local Government Forum on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion at Glen Ira, held with the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, a US-based advocacy body promoting council motions, policy guidance, training and coordinated advocacy. Why were council resources available when unnamed residents objected to Palestine-related activity, while Arab and Palestinian concerns were excluded from debate. Will Council disclose whether resources may be used to restrict Palestine-related discussion through CAM or related programs? Will Council disclose whether CAM, ASECA, JCCV, Courage to Care, Glen Ira Council, or another external body has provided or may provide funding, sponsorship, in-kind support, policy templates, training, proposed motions, or follow-up guidance? During the Voice referendum, when First Nations people faced local racism, what comparable mediation, counselling, or social cohesion process was offered? If none, why is Council's response uneven? I'd like to ask Director of Healthy Communities, Kath Skinner, to respond to this. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot of questions in this question, so I'm going to answer them one by one, working through them. Why were resources offered in 2023? Council was approached to assist in connecting community members. We were not asked to form a position on the topic of discussion. In relation to the development of the establishing formal positions policy, the policy was not developed in relation to one specific matter. The policy was informed by experiences and requests on multiple matters where, and I quote, Council has little or no authority to determine the outcome of the matter and can have little impact on the views of those making the decision, end of quote, taken directly from the policy. In relation to issues about Palestine expression and allocation of resources, Council engages with a broad representation of community groups and organisations in undertaking its work. Mayor Hayden attends a range of local government-sponsored events, including the one referenced to at Glen Ira, where a range of anti-discrimination topics were discussed and conversations were not limited to anti-Semitism. In relation to why were council resources available when unnamed residents objected to Palestine-related activity, while Arab and Palestinian concerns were excluded from the debate? I'm aware that a previous council employee considered attempting to support the groups to come together in respectful conversation in the interest of community cohesion. However, it's my understanding that this did not progress. There was no debate and no groups were excluded. In relation to the question, will Council disclose whether CAM, ASECA, JCCV, Courage to Care, Glen Ira Council and other external body has provided any funding, sponsorship, in-kind support, policy templates, training, proposed motions or follow-up guidance? Council has not received or accepted funding or support from Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, Australia's Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism, Jewish Community Council of Victoria, Courage to Care, Glen Ira Council or any other external organisation. The question, will Council disclose whether resources may have used to restrict Palestine-related discussion through CAM or related programs? Council is not involved in restricting Palestine-related discussions. During the Voice referendum, when First Nations people face local racism, what comparable mediation, counselling or social cohesion process was offered? If none, why is Council's response uneven? This question implies an assumption that Council provided support for some Jewish groups and not to others, which is not the case. We reject the comparison between Council's support for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within the Shire.
Thank you, Director Skinner. And thanks, Lawrence, for your question. So as I said, we have 2 other submitted questions, but they do concern planning matters, so we can't read them tonight. Are there any questions from the floor this evening? Yes. Sorry, can you come to the microphone, please? Because can you please introduce yourself and state if you're representing an organisation?
No, I'm not representing anybody. I just,
What's your
my
name?
name, is Christine. I was about to do that. Christine McHugh. And I would like to ask you, did you write a report on that meeting on anti-Semitism that you attended?
Not as such, no, not a standalone.
Would you be able to put something together so that
Sure.
we can see what was discussed and
Happy to.
the outcomes? Okay, thank you.
More than happy to. Any other questions from the floor tonight? Yes, please come forward and if you could state your name and if you're representing an organisation.
Hi, my name's Amy. I'm not representing an organisation.
Amy?
Amy Tacey.
Thank you.
I live in Friarstown. Day to day, I work to improve food systems to be more equitable, sustainable, culturally appropriate, and healthy. But I am here as a resident. On 21st of May, ABC News reported that McDonald's had purchased and is intending to develop 72 to 80 Forest Street, which according to VCAT is Castlemaine's arrival point. Since that announcement, the community has been working together to find a way to help council to protect our environmental, social, economic, cultural strengths from being undermined by such a development. Council will be aware that David Eddershank MP recently introduced the Planning and Environment Local Government Control of Fast Food Establishments Amendment Bill, and that on 17th of June, the bill had its second reading in Parliament. The bill seeks to, it sort of has a proposal, I guess, of one component is that when making a decision on fast food outlet planning applications, council must consider certain matters, including whether the applicant has demonstrated that the fast food outlet will not cause harm to the public health of residents, to the public health of residents of the municipal district in which the land is situated, the proximity of the land to any schools, the number of fast food outlets within a 5K radius of the land, local obesity or public health data. I guess there's growing debate and public concern around the need to regulate and prohibit fast food outlets, as evidenced by this bill and the multitude of planning disputes at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Council will have received a letter from Nick Rose, the Executive Director of Sustain Australia, outlining that a number of 4 growth councils around Victoria, around Melbourne, the mayors signed a letter to the Planning Minister, Sonia Kilkenny, asking for support and enabling environment and authorising environment to prohibit the unchecked and unregulated proliferation of fast food outlets, specifically those that are multinational corporations. There is now public debate and community concern in Castlemaine about this announcement. The prominent corner site is situated at the entry to Castlemaine's historic town, and this is the Castlemaine Central Conservation Area Heritage Overlay 667. The site was rezoned many years ago in recognition for its potential town centre expansion. The design and development overlays applies to the site, and this DDO sets out requirements for development of the site, e.g. active frontages, building height, access to public space. My question, and I would like to preface that the group and myself, though I'm not representing anyone, but a growing group of people are very aware of the roles of state and local governments in planning. So in response to my question, I don't need to be repeated the standard council operating procedure. But my question is, will council follow the lead of other councils by writing to the Planning Minister, Sonia Kilkenny, in support of this amendment bill, and that council does not appear to have an overall vision of the Forest Street precinct. However, the DDO for the Forest Street site does provide scope for the articulation of a vision. Based on the DDO, what is council's vision for the site having regard to Castlemaine's local distinctiveness, opportunities for local business, creating vibrant streets, streetscapes, urban experience, all while supporting the health and well-being of residents in the Shire. All things that you have committed to in various council plans, planning schemes and health and well-being plans.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Yes, we have received those letters and they remain under consideration. We have yet to receive a planning application for that site in Forest Street. If and when we do receive a planning application for that site, then that will be considered in line with our planning framework, and that includes social, environmental, and economic factors. Thank you. Any other questions from, yes, up the back?
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name is Adam Zaborchik and I live in Barkers Creek Ward. Excuse me, I'd like to speak to you for a few minutes today about the development pressures facing our Shire and how well we are placed to respond to those, not specifically in relation to any one planning application, but more broadly around the various developments that we're seeing. And I suppose specifically my question relates to the design controls that are in place in the Shire to retain the character that makes our townships unique, and really to prevent our Shire from resembling Sunbury or Kangaroo Flat. So you'll all be aware of the potential development sites in the Shire, land that's already been banked and ready for development. I don't need to spend any time pointing out the potential. We live in a charming community with characterful heritage streetscapes set among native bushland surrounded by farmland. Our buildings are small in scale, streets are dimly lit, our signage is understated, and tree canopies shade our streets and provide habitat for birds and wildlife. And these are the qualities that we, and I'm sure you, enjoy, and the reason that people come to visit our community. I'd like to see that those characteristics continue into the future, but I'm concerned by looking around at recent developments that we lack the planning controls that, to ensure that we protect those characteristics. I'm not opposed to development, and I think many people in our community aren't. And I can point to numerous developments, whether our care, aged care, Mount Alexander Hardware, the mill development, housing along the Pyrenees Highway in Chitton, numerous developments that that benefit our community. My concern is that without stronger controls, and we've just heard about the McDonald's site, whether it's the Woolworths site, we'll be hearing about Camp Reserve later this evening. Without stronger controls, incrementally, one by one, a tree here, an illuminated sign there, a big box retail development, a fast food outlet, our town will gradually lose its character and the aspects that make it unique. And so, Mayor, I'm largely happy for you to take my comment, my remarks as a comment, but I would urge council to take steps to preserve the character of the town, to put in place the planning controls that we need to ensure that they're preserved and that we protect the character of our communities. Thank you. I guess if there's a question, it's what steps can council take in the course of the current council plan to ensure that that's the case?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And so we do have a number of our planning scheme does go into some detail in terms of neighbourhood character studies, the various overlays that you'd be familiar with. But I want to say how thrilled I am that you have raised these issues and that you are so proud of the character of our town. I am too, and I think all of us in this room are very proud of Castlemaine. It's a beautiful place. Thinking about neighbourhood character, there are a range of different mechanisms within the planning scheme that can that relate to neighbourhood character. But I also note that under the planning law, it's as Amy pointed out, the local government planning scheme works within the state government planning scheme too. So those are some considerations. But and I also add that the planning scheme is available. All of the schedules and attachments are all available on our website. And so I encourage the public to familiarise themselves with those documents. They're really interesting documents. And it's a common topic of conversation around town about how we best ensure the neighbourhood character of not just Castlemaine, but towns and countryside throughout the Shire. I thank you for your comment and question.
Thank you.
Sorry, Adam, a clarifying question. You mentioned in your dissertation Sunbury and Kangaroo Flat. Can you explain that a bit for me, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Driscoll. Specifically, I think the big box nature of some of those developments, they're quite uniform. They're tilt up concrete developments because they're cheap and simple to build. They're cheap and simple to build. That, you know, the big box. I won't name brands, and I don't mean the hardware store the green hardware store up the road, but the repetitive nature of large big box developments, which don't reflect, you know, the smaller scale of our historic buildings, the form and the shape of, you know, roof lines and our facades and so on. But also, I guess my concern is with every planning application, there's a proposal to remove trees, and sometimes that's necessary. But I think we need to recognise the value of trees, the cumulative impact of bright illuminated signage. It's easy in a planning application to approve a single sign, but when they stack up and you've got, you know, brand after brand after brand, when I say Sunbury or Kangaroo Flat, those are the types of step-by-step erosion of character that can occur. And my concern in my question is that we don't have the character controls in place that would prevent us requiring new development to reflect the existing character and form of our town. So if we wanted to mitigate the height of a sign or require the light to be turned off at 9 p.m. or whatever it may be to ensure consistent character with our townships, we lack the controls in our planning scheme to be able to do that. And in my mind, I guess it would be a request from council to the minister to put in place more stringent character controls that recognise the unique, you know, the unique form and characteristics of our communities, not just Castlemaine, but the other townships as well. Yeah.
Thank. Councillor Maddock, do you have a clarifying question?
Or maybe more procedural. There's been specific questions asked both in Amy's address and Adam's address, which I think will be very hard to answer tonight. I think Amy was asking, what are our plans for that particular site on Forest Street? Adam's asking what if there are other controls to maintain character. Would it be appropriate to take these on notice and give more fulsome responses potentially? Because I mean, personally, I'd be interested to know as well.
Yeah. Well, firstly, we can't speak about a planning matter before this council meeting. Secondly, we really can't speak with any confidence on a planning matter that has yet to come before council. However, we have a fantastic team here, and I would encourage you to follow up with myself or with Interim Director of Infrastructure, Anthony Petherbridge, after the meeting, and we can have those more fulsome conversations. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Maddock. Thanks, Adam. Any other questions from the floor tonight? Yes.
Sorry, I'm not sure how things work. Christine, thank you. These AI data centres, is council able to put together some sort of policy? There are 200 already in Australia. They're planning 600 more. Chances are they'll want to put one here, you just don't know. Is that a possibility that council could put some sort of policy around it, or will that make any difference? That's all. I don't know how things work.
I'm loath to wade into territory that I'm not expert on. I will note, however, what I said before, that our planning scheme works with the state government planning scheme as well. Happy to take that on notice if you want to get in touch with us after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor tonight? Okay.
I'll move the resumption of standing orders, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Maltby, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. All those in favour and opposed, and it's carried. So we have nothing under item 7, petitions and letters. However, we will be addressing a petition under item 9 later in the meeting. So item 8, committee reports. The Audit and Risk Committee meeting minutes. Councillor Driscoll, would you introduce this, please?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, in accordance with Section 53 of the Local Government Act 2020, Council must establish an Audit and Risk Committee. Committee members must collectively have expertise in financial management and risk expertise in public sector management. In accordance with Section 54(2) of the Act, Council must prepare and approve Audit and Risk Committee Charter, which specialises in the functions of responsibility of the committee, including monitoring the compliance of Council policies and procedures, the overreaching governance principles, the Act and regulations and the ministerial directions, monitor Council financial and performance reporting, and monitor and provide advice on risk management and fraud prevention systems and controls, and also oversees internal and external audit functions. The purpose of this report, Mayor, is to present to Council the confidential minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 1st of June 2026. And Mayor, I'd also like to move that Council notes the confidential minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 1st of June 2026.
Thanks, Councillor Driscoll. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Cordy? Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought it just got moved.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've moved it. You'll second it?
If you like. Would you like to speak further to it, Councillor Driscoll?
No, I've said all I need to say. Thanks.
Thank
Yes,
you.
look, I'd just note that the Audit and Risk Committee is a very important team, and our Audit and Risk is headed up by a great team, including Pip Murphy and co-chair Peter Smith. We've got independent members. It's on. Got independent members, John Watson and Dr. Jolene Morse, and they're highly experienced and people and doing a great job for us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Driscoll, right of reply.
Just to reiterate, Councillor Cordy, we have a very good independent Audit and Risk Committee.
Thanks, Councillor Driscoll. All those in favour and opposed, and that's carried. Now, item 9, officer reports. 9.1.1 is planning application for Camp Reserve Castlemaine. Can I ask Councillor Anir to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to enable Council to decide on an application for buildings and works associated with a minor sports and recreation facility, alteration of access to a Transport Zone 2, demolition, removal of native and non-native vegetation, and provision of car parking at 11 Forest Street, Castlemaine. The application has been referred to Council for a decision because the application has received greater than 10 objections. The council officer recommendation is to recommend an approval of the application subject to conditions. The subject site is within clause 36.02, public park and recreation zone, and is affected by the clause 42.03, significant landscape overlay, schedule 2, clause 43.01, heritage overlay H0668, clause 44.03, floodway overlay, and clause 44.04, land subject to inundation overlay. The application was advertised. 106 objections and 96 letters of support were received. The application was assessed against and determined that the proposal is consistent with the relevant sections of the planning policy framework. It also meets the provisions of the public park and recreation zone, heritage overlay, floodway overlay, and land subject to inundation overlay. In forming this position, consideration was given to the grounds of objection and the views of the relevant referral authorities. Do you want me to do a motion too? And I will move the motion that council resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant planning permit PA 077/2025 for buildings and works associated with a minor sports and recreation facility, alterations of access to a transport zone 2, demolition, removal of native and non-native vegetation, and provision of car parking at 11 Forest Street, Castlemaine, subject to the following conditions, which are as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Anea. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Mayor, I will.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Do we have any opposition? Oh, Councillor Maddock?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose some amendments to this, if possible.
Amendments? Okay. Do you want to introduce or just briefly describe
Yeah,
those?
absolutely. So the first is and it's the same as the last time that these were raised in the tree maintenance plan at condition 16, and it's an addition to B. And I'll read that full section out. So as it reads is propagation opportunities and recommendations for significant trees, including the river red gums. And I'm seeking to add to that sentence inclusive. Sorry, I should have read. So preparation of a tree maintenance plan for the site that addresses the following. And I'm seeking to add to be inclusive of seed collection and germination from the river red gums prior to their removal. My other amendment is to condition 38, bicycle parking requirements, and it's to change the number of available spaces from 6 to 20, and this would read, no fewer than 20 bicycle parking spaces must be provided on the land to the satisfaction of the reasonable authority.
Thank you, Councillor Maddock. Do we have a seconder for the amendments? Thanks, Councillor Hastwell. I'll ask the original mover if you're prepared to accept those amendments, and seconder.
I'm happy with those amendments, Mayor.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, councillors. So those two amendments then form part of the substantive motion, and we return to that substantive motion. So the seconder for the substantive motion, actually, firstly, do we have any opposition to the substantive motion as it stands now?
Mayor, I'd just like to foreshadow that I've got another motion prepared here, which is for refusal on the grounds that the development is unacceptable and contrary to heritage policy, and that the proposal does not achieve an acceptable heritage outcome when assessed against the decision guidelines.
Okay, thank you. And I realise that I didn't provide Councillor Anea the chance to speak to her motion. Councillor Anea, if you'll forgive me, and would you like to speak to your motion now, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I spoke at length at the May meeting, quite at length, in fact. So I don't actually have very much to say tonight, I don't think. Since the May meeting, obviously we've had lots of information and lots of ideas presented to us, and I feel there's been still been a lot of conversation about this matter, which has, you know, it's always good to hear all that. And obviously, we were unable to reach a decision at the May meeting, so we have the same planning application back before us for decision. There is not much, I would say, in what I said previously in May, again at great length, that it doesn't stand true today. I think I remain supportive of approving this planning permit for the reasons that I've stated previously. I feel disappointed at, I guess, at the point we have reached with this, and yeah, it's a rough one, which is tricky too. I think that perhaps we've come in some ways quite far from the planning permit application at times, but obviously that's what we're making the decision on tonight. I really don't have much more to say that I haven't previously said. You know, I think we've all, whether or not we be returning councillors or councillors who were new at the 2024 election, we've all spent a lot of time with this application, doing lots of listening and lots of considering, and, you know, at all times keeping our minds open to new information. But at the end of the day, we do need to make a decision on this planning application, which is why we're here, for one of the reasons we're here tonight talking about it again. I feel similarly to the way I did in May, though probably a little bit more worn down at this point. And yeah, I don't have much else to say. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Anea. Before I ask Councillor Walker if he wants to speak now or reserve his right, and aware of Councillor Maddox's foreshadow, is there any other opposition to this motion? Councillor Haswell. Councillor Walker, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, Mayor. Thank you. When I was campaigning to be elected to council, I stated a number of principles. The first one was that I would vote for what I considered to be intellectually and ethically the best option, the head and the soul. Second, I'd be open to lobbying, but I would not pander to voter bases. I'd be willing to make unpopular decisions. An attraction to the role of councillor was that I considered I had a range of life experiences that were valid to contribute, plus it provided new challenges and learnings. That would mean mistakes would happen, in which case I'd own them, acknowledge them, and to the extent possible rectify it. The Camp Reserve decision we took last time was a mistake. For a start, the process was flawed. That was not intentional, rather a last-minute thought bubble that took a number of my fellow councillors plus members of the public by surprise. I do apologise for that. Even if the process was flawed, if I thought the outcome was correct, I would stand by it. But the intent of the amendment was to save a few trees and offer an appeasement to a group who I do consider have some genuine concerns, and then to have this substantive resolution carried. That did not, because wanted the proposal carried, and the difference was over the amendment. Accordingly, I consider the only viable option is to return to the original motion. There are two reasons why I'd like to see the resolution carried. First of all, I've spent a career in community development, and that is premised on building communities. And in this context, what was already a challenging decision with deep divisions, those divisions have been deepened. I know returning to the original won't resolve that. If the last decision alienated one group, this will alienate another, but it is a necessary step. Secondly is financial. We are not a rich enough council to be continuously redesigning and significantly amending projects, even major ones. Our budget is stretched to the limit. I look at the list of items proposed to our last budget, all of them valid, and we could not fund it. And to be sending this back to the drawing board will cost at least another $500,000, which is money we don't have. It's easy for councillors to request officers to do things, and because councillors request it, that gets priority, and then residents' matters don't receive the attention that they deserve. Yes, it would be nice to save some trees, but like all of us, trees do get old and die, though to be fair, it takes them a couple of hundred more years. The netball courts are problematic in the north due to flooding, meaning the surface requires continuous rebuild. And then that would require a pavilion redesign because a core component of development is to address pre-existing gender segregation, and that would not happen. It would be nice if the pavilion had a grandstand with formal seating, but then maintenance with cement is cheaper. This matter has been worked through over several years, and it is time, in fact, to move on. There are other issues looming, such as calls for an indoor swimming pool, or as we've been presented with tonight, some very difficult planning decisions looming. So to those who got their hopes up, I'm sorry, but with all due respect, you should have read the room. The indicators were there. I have sympathy for concerns, but there are times you just have to say, this is it, let's accept that and move on. This design has now been professionally assessed and approved. It meets all relevant legislation. It accords with the requirements of other authorities and has broad public support. 2 prior councils have voted endorsement, and no doubt they, as certainly we, have been extensively briefed. I thank my councillors for giving me the opportunity to present this case and request you to support the resolution. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Hastwell, would you like to speak now?
Thank you. And I would just want to acknowledge the people that we have in the room here tonight as well, and you know, acknowledge that I am sure that some of you come from differing positions, but you know, to demonstrate that level of commitment in terms of what your beliefs and values are in relation to the matters before us, I think is a fantastic show of democratic participation. I also wanted to say that it's clear that there are different views, not only in the room, in the audience, but there are also different views and conclusions around the group. And I also want to thank and respect my fellow councillors for their rigorous attention to this matter, and thank you particularly, Councillor Walker, for your very considered statement then. So if you'll bear with me, I've also prepared some words because it is a really complex matter, and it's I think many of us have thought hard and long about this. And even though, you know, as Councillor Anir noted, we have talked extensively in relation to this at the May meeting, I think it's also, you know, does it justice for to hear different views around the table around again. So what we have before us is obviously a planning decision, and I think, as we've heard already, it brings with it a lot of complexity, as it is in relation to a master plan for Camp Reserve, which has been for many years and continues to be the subject of some passionately held and strongly argued conflicting positions within the community. There is no doubt that there are key issues to be addressed in terms of the inadequacy of the facilities at Camp Reserve, with the most pressing and immediate of these being, I think, the female change rooms. There is broad consensus that the current facilities need to be upgraded, and also that there's an important opportunity for further enhancement. There is also no doubt that the organised sporting uses of the reserve are supported and made possible by many committed community members and volunteers, and that there are significant benefits, including for young people involved in the sports that are played and enjoyed there. I'm sure, I'm imagining that we'll probably hear some more about that, I hope, from some of my fellow councillors. What we have before us tonight, though, is not a debate about whether the facilities need to be upgraded. This is also not primarily a debate about the merits or otherwise of the current master plan, which we are aware has been adopted by previous councils. What we have here is a decision about a planning application and the recognition that there are deeply divided positions on this application. Many of you will be aware, but forgive me for stating again that as many of the supporters and objectors to the application are very aware, there has been a long and detailed process, and that was also referred to by both of my fellow councillors, with very significant resourcing from council and officers, and with the expert input of a range of consultants in order to get to this stage. The user groups of the reserve, including the sporting clubs and the agricultural show, have expressed strong support, both for the master plan, which recognises and provides for their needs and aspirations, and that support now extends to the advertised planning application. As Councillor Anir mentioned, we have, Council received 96 letters of support for the application. Of course, the site belongs not only to one group and one function, not even to 2 or 3 groups or functions, but in many ways belongs to the whole community. I do believe that it's important to hear and assess the wide range of views in relation to this planning application. And while Council received 96 letters of support, there were also 106 objections. It is absolutely clear when you look at that range of responses that the significance of this site has different values to different parts of the community. And also that many of these different and potentially conflicting values are reflected in various ways within the planning scheme, which in my view makes our job particularly difficult. In addition to those who've supported enabled the work so far, I would like to acknowledge the many hours, significant expertise and knowledge represented by other groups and individuals who are not part of the organised sporting and associated groups. As councillors, we've heard that there is a deep commitment to heritage, character and environmental values associated with the site, which are relevant to this application. Objectors have made it clear that they also recognise the need for upgraded and expanded facilities at the site, and there have been, I believe, sincere approaches by a number of these objectors to suggest compromises which could potentially, perhaps, go some way to satisfying both the needs of the sporting clubs and the heritage, character and environmental values. I think it's important that we consider and hear the valid views of all in the community. I do want to touch just briefly on several of the key issues and themes that have been presented to Council by objectors to the planning application. Firstly, financial. Council received 48 objections concerned about the financial impact of implementing this project. I think this is an entirely understandable concern, given the very significant budget that the project would entail if it were to go ahead, and the fact that Council and the community have many other priorities and increasingly we're required to meet these within significant financial constraints. This is, however, a planning application, which is not the same as a decision on whether or not the project is the top priority for investment by the Shire. I'm not commenting on that in any way, or whether it represents value for money. And so my position in relation to the planning application is not dependent on considerations about budget. There were 37 objections in regard to poor consultation with groups and interests outside of the current sporting and key user groups. It's been argued that these have not been ideal throughout the long history of the development and adoption of the master plan. However, as outlined in the officer's report, consultation with regard to this planning application has been in accordance with the statutory consultation requirements and the issues raised. There were also 67 objections on the basis of heritage and 75 on environmental impact. And these are the areas which still concern me from a planning perspective. It's important, I think, to acknowledge that the site does present several different social and cultural heritage aspects. And I did speak to that in some detail at the May meeting. I am satisfied that the consideration of Aboriginal cultural heritage has been undertaken in consultation with JARA, and this vital aspect of the site is well covered, I believe, in the heritage conditions outlined in the report. The site's history of use for sports is also very much inherently respected within the proposal. However, the contentious carving into the southwest corner of the site, which is known as the Hill, to accommodate new netball courts, is and remains, I believe, a prime area of concern in terms of gold heritage, landscape character and spatial qualities. And I think it has to be acknowledged that these are of great significance to some and not to others. But they are considerations in terms of planning scheme. The application, if successful, would also entail removing 6 trees that have been assessed in the arborist's report as high retention, including 2 red river gums, which are central to the site, prominent to the view into the site from outside, and are identified by the arborist's report as likely to be Indigenous and remnant to the site. I won't go into all of the detail of other concerns, but these and other concerns raised by many objectors remain inherent in the application and I believe need to be considered. Like other councillors and Councillor Anir and Councillor Walker, I think have presented this very convincingly. I've thought long and hard about this application. I think we all have. I'm sure we all have. I've reviewed a mountain of reports and analysis, have revisited the timeline and processes behind the adoption of the master plan in 2020. I and other councillors have taken time to meet and speak with community members who have approached us about their concerns with the planning application. It's not easy, it's not straightforward in terms, in my view, of developing a position on this, but my concerns in relation to the areas I've highlighted do remain, and so that's my position. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hastwell. Other councillors like to speak to this. Councillor Maltby.
Thanks, Mayor. Probably 3 or 4 things. Captain Bull set up the Camp Reserve and the Gold Commissioners area over there, and that was in the 1850s. And over time, history has changed the venue, but the heritage reports that are part of the planning application do not question the loss of heritage. And Councillor Haswell mentions trees. Castlemaine Mail 2 weeks ago produced 2 photos, 1917, and the red gums weren't in it. And those 2 red gums right now have been taped around for at least 3 or 4 years because they're a danger. And this area, 167 years of football, 145 years of cricket, 172 years of the Agricultural Show Society. History changes every day, and we do have to upgrade the facilities for especially the female sports people who are now playing more sport than they used to. And the Camp Reserve, and I know one councillor doesn't agree with me, but the Camp Reserve is the primary sporting venue in the Shire. Recently, over the last 6 years, we've spent money at Harcourt on their reserve, at Newstead, at Malden, and we're spending money at Campbell's Creek now. Castlemaine needs that facility upgraded so that everybody that uses it, whether it be people walking their dogs around the oval, they shouldn't be walking them on the oval, but because it is a very central, lovely venue, and the more people that can use it, the better. But if we don't upgrade it, we're not getting anywhere. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Maltby. Councillor Cordy.
Thanks, Mayor. For me, we're talking about netball, football, cricket, athletics, working dogs, horses, walkers, runners, agricultural shows, swap meets, markets, car shows, bike shows, rock concerts, emergency services displays. The list goes on. Our community deserves the best facilities we can provide. I support the planning application to upgrade facilities at Camp Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordy. The other councillors, like Councillor Driscoll.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, fellow councillors and members of the community. I intend to support Councillor Neer's motion to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the redevelopment of Camp Reserve, subject to the extensive conditions set out on the conditions. I do not arrive at this position by dismissing the concerns raised by objectors. There are 106 objections and 96 submissions in support. That level of interest tells us that Camp Reserve matters deeply to Castlemaine as a sporting ground, public park, historic place, and a community gathering place. Our responsibility tonight is to make a statutory planning decision. It is not a referendum determined by counting submissions. We must assess the proposal against the planning scheme, the evidence, the referral authorities, and the permit conditions. In my view, the application provides a net community benefit, but I want to address directly two of the most difficult aspects. That's tree removal and heritage. First, the trees. We should be candid. This proposal will cause a real and visible change to the landscape. It will be wrong to suggest that every tree proposed for removal is dead, unsafe, or of little value. The agricultural assessment considered 37 trees in the southern part of the reserve. The officer report identified 17 Monterey cypresses along the Gingell Street boundary as recommended for removal because of their age and poor condition. It also identifies a further 10 trees affected by the proposed works because the construction would result in complete encroachment into the tree protection zone. Importantly, that latter group includes 5 trees assessed as having high retention value, 2 of the moderate retention value and 3 of low retention value. This is a substantial impact. Mature trees cannot be replaced instantly. Their shade, habitat and visual presence have developed over decades, and some contribute to the heritage landscape even though they are introduced species. The reserve will change, and those concerned about that loss deserve to be heard. The planning question is whether removal has been avoided and minimised as far as practicable, and whether the remaining impact is acceptably mitigated. The layout has been revised through arboricultural, landscape and heritage advice. Large areas of open space and many established trees remain, while the past near retained trees are to use treatments that minimise excavation within the tree protection zones. The permit requires retained native vegetation to be identified and protected before works begin. Removal of 0.87 hectares of native vegetation requires a statutory offset of 0.021 hectares. General habitat units. Landscaping must be completed and maintained, with dead, diseased and damaged trees replaced. Most importantly, a tree maintenance and succession plan must provide for Monterey cypresses, river red gums, English oaks and other heritage significant or high retention trees. It must address replacement planting, propagation, maintenance, inventory and protection zones. This is critical because Council must plan for not only the opening day, but for what the reserve will look like in 20, 40 and 50 years. New amenity trees are proposed around the netball courts. Native planting, including river red gums, is proposed in the hill area, and further planting along Forest Street has been recommended. The heritage significant Canary Island date palm is to be relocated and protected, and timber from the removed trees must also be considered for reuse on site and in heritage interpretation. I expect Council to treat these requirements as serious long-term obligations. Replacement trees will be appropriately advanced, funded and monitored, and failed plantings replaced. On balance, I accept that the tree impacts have been reduced where practicable and can be managed through enforceable protection, offset, replacement and succession measures. The loss is real, but it does not justify refusal of the entire application. The second major issue I want to touch on is heritage. Camp Reserve is not an ordinary recreation reserve. It is within Heritage Overlay HO 668 and is included in the Victorian Heritage Inventory as the former Commissioner's campsite. Its story includes Jar Jar Wrong Country, the Gold Commissioner's Camp, 19th century government activity, military uses, agricultural shows, and more than 160 years of organised sport and public recreation. The heritage material identifies the reserve's significance primarily in its historic uses, open landscape, spatial relationships, archaeologically significant trees and continuing public recreational role. The existing pavilion and ancillary buildings proposed for demolition are not identified as individually significant heritage fabric. Their removal is considered acceptable provided the mitigation measures are implemented. The proposal has been reviewed by the applicant's advisors, Council's external heritage advisors and Heritage Victoria. Changes recommended by Council advisors were incorporated before advertising, and Heritage Victoria has issued the relevant archaeological consent, including consent to damage of less than 50% subject to the details conditions. The new pavilion responds to that advice. It is a single story, low and articulated. Its design references traditional grandstand and agricultural shed forms, while its siting seeks to retain open landscapes character, reduce excavation and limits impacts on adjoining residences. Archaeological disturbance remains possible and must be managed rigorously. Recorded features include post holes, linear features and stone foundations. The conditions require supervision by the approved archaeologists, investigation of high potential areas and an immediate stop to works if potentially significant remains are uncovered. The permit also requires archival photography, salvage of reuse of significant materials, conservation works, artefact management and reporting to Heritage Victoria. These are enforceable requirements, not optional aspirations. I particularly support the Heritage Interpretation Plan. It must address Aboriginal cultural heritage as well as post-contact archaeological and natural values, with Jarrah actively involved in Aboriginal interpretation. The story must not begin with the Gold Commissioner's camp. It must acknowledge the much longer Dja Dja Wurrung connection to country. Having considered the heritage advice, archaeological controls and design response, I am satisfied that these impacts can be acceptably managed. The approval preserves the public recreation use that is in itself part of the Camp's Reserve's history, while imposing strong obligations to investigate, conserve, record, reuse and interpret the place. The proposal also delivers 2 new netball courts, contemporary change rooms, universal access, accessible spectator areas, safer pedestrian routes and more orderly traffic and parking arrangements. These facilities will better support women and girls, junior participants, people with disabilities, older residents and the many sporting and community groups that use the reserve. Flood risk has been modelled. The pavilion, timekeeper's box and netball courts exceed the recommended minimum levels, and the modelling concludes that the works will not increase flood levels on neighbouring properties or roads. Amenity concerns are addressed through acoustics, lighting, patron management and traffic conditions. Concerns about the cost and use of public funds are legitimate matters for Council's budget, procurement and project governance processes. They should continue to receive careful scrutiny. They are not, however, relevant grounds which to refuse this planning permit under the Planning and Environment Act. Mayor, this decision involving genuine competing values. We are being asked to review an important community facility while protecting a valued landscape and one of Castlemaine's most historical significant public places. There is no option that leaves every value entirely untouched. I support the motion because the proposal continues the reserve historic public recreation role, provides safer and more inclusive facilities, has been reviewed by the relevant authorities and is controlled by extensive conditions. My support rests upon removal being limited to the approved extent, retained trees being protected, offsets and replacements, planting being delivered, the succession plan being implemented and Council complying fully with the heritage conditions involving Jarrah and interpreting the complete history of the place. Having weighed the impacts against the planning evidence and broader community benefit, I am satisfied that this is an acceptable planning outcome. I therefore support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. Councillor Maddock.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I think it's a shame and a tragedy that such an important and vital project as Camp Reserve should be stymied by so much community division and opposition. This is a tragedy because I think the extent of this division was entirely avoidable, and I think will likely haunt and impede this project for a long time to come. And I want to be clear, the problems are not that there are objections. The problems lie firmly within the proposition itself. I want to see our sports clubs well supported. I want to see equality in how we fund and support our different sports across the Shire. I want to see our grounds and our facilities working as best they can for our community. I have sympathy for the needs of the sports user groups, and I have sympathy for many of the points raised by the objectors. My primary concern here is that the project does not get the balance right, is unnecessarily divisive as a result, and makes this project less likely to attract funding and ever being completed in its current form. I would like this council to take the fastest track possible towards getting the best outcome on this site, and I don't think this planning application before us is that. This is why I'm moving, or this is why I would attempt to remove the officer prepared grounds for refusal. We must move forwards in a way that does not divide our community. We must have more compromise from the sports user groups, and we must get better recognition of the site's other uses, importance, character, and heritage values. The grounds presented to us strongly align, this is the grounds for refusal, strongly align with the comments made by our officers in their recommendations around the officer preferred master plan in 2020. Including that they sought to avoid a major transformation of the slope at the southern end of the reserve. The grounds presented consist of that the development is unacceptable and contrary to heritage policy at clause 02.03-5, clause 15.03-1s, 15.03-1L of the Man Alexander Planning Scheme, and also that the proposal does not achieve an acceptable heritage outcome when assessed against the decision guidelines of clause 43.01-8 of the Man Alexander Planning Scheme. Importantly, going back to the 2020 officer recommendations, officers did not recommend the committee's preference to locate the netball courts in the south of the site, and the reasons were given as a significant shift in use and character of the reserve's southern boundary. The slope on the southern end of the site is important to the open character of the reserve. It provides a natural amphitheatre for spectators and a vegetated buffer between the residential area and the oval. This sentiment was also recommended in our Heritage and Urban Design Officers report, given at the same time, recommending that the perimeter of the camp reserve along Forest and Jingle Street remain free of permanent built form in order to preserve the historic character of the reserve. And I'll underline the historic character of the reserve there, because that slope has been cited as one of the most important aspects of the character of the reserve. They recommended the spaces, vistas and routes through and around Camp Reserve should be retained. The Heritage Officer concluded, in order to provide equitable access to the pavilion for all user groups, Council should investigate locating the pavilion within the flood zone. The pavilion would then preserve the slope and leave plenty of open space for an event lawn at the southern entrance.
Councillor Maddock, if I could ask you to stay focused on the planning application and not relitigating the reports from the master plan. That would be a different debate.
Sure, I'll attempt to edit this, but I think I've finished with that section. The grounds for refusal point to relevant sections of the planning scheme that recognise the rural appearance and character of the Shire as a strong element of its appeal for residents and visitors, and also a need to protect and conserve the historic fabric and maintain the integrity of the places of historic heritage. Support development of rural land that does not detract from the appearance and character of the area. Provide for the protection of natural heritage sites, and encourage appropriate development that respects places with identified heritage values. I feel strongly that this proposal does not do that adequately, that there are solutions available to us which do, and would also allow the project to move forwards quicker and unite the community in our commitment to community sports and heritage. We must acknowledge the role of the following. I think we need to acknowledge the role of the following factors in how we've come to such a divisive proposition. One, the deviation from the office's recommendation in 2022 to adopt the committee preferred master plan option, which saw the netball courts located to the south, where you see them in the proposition today. Perhaps earlier in the centering of the committee of management in the development of the draft master plan for the site, which belongs and is important for the whole community. The apparent need for greater compromise and conciliation between user groups and community interests. An underpinning sports and recreation option paper, which does not adequately consider the site's broader uses and the importance of its character and heritage values. A heritage report before us here, which I think is prejudiced towards a single preferred option rather than objectively promoting the best heritage outcomes for the site. The promotion, and then lastly, the promotion of the site as a premier sporting facility, despite this decision seemingly never coming before this council, and a status which has in it inherent conflicts between the site's physical constraints, between the status and the site's physical constraints, broader uses and importance, and its heritage, values and character. I think we can do so much better than this. We can give this project a much better chance of getting up, and our sporting clubs a much better chance and quicker, potentially quicker way of getting what they so need. Most importantly, we can come up with something that brings everyone along and deliver a project we can all get behind and celebrate. And a project of this importance that is truly intergenerational should bring everyone along. What is before us is unfortunately not that. So I urge my colleagues to vote against this proposal. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Maddock. Councillor Anir, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillor colleagues, for all your words. Really, it's yeah. Thanks for doing that. I don't know. I think Councillor Haswell, I just wanted to address something you said very quickly off the bat. When I was floundering a bit earlier, when I was trying to think about what to say, I'm not speaking to it because I don't think it deserves to be given justice. You know me, I am a lengthy speaker. I think in the course of watching back the previous the May meeting several times, what stuck out to me was how horrifically long I spoke for, and I really did feel, you know, that was the meeting at which I'd prepared my, you know, I had my speech ready and I'd written it all down, whereas look, honestly, the last 2 months have taken a toll on me and I just couldn't do that tonight. So I'm left with, luckily, you find people who, whether or not we agree about this specific planning application, you know, I trust to bring the words when I can't bring them myself. So thank you, colleagues, for that. And also, obviously, to everyone else who's been on this journey with us. It's been a long time. I think, you know, I honestly cannot remember who said it, but one of you said, it was you, Councillor Driscoll, and thank you for your very well considered words. I appreciate it. You said that there's no option that leaves every value entirely untouched. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been thinking about this a lot because of the impossible position I feel that that anyone in a position like we are, having to make decisions about things like this that that affect many people and that so many people care very, very much about, how impossible that is sometimes when not everyone agrees, and we're kind of stuck in the middle at times, it seems, with you know, competing demands and different views on what our place is for and what is important about that site. This has felt impossible at times, and I think with developments like this on a site that does have multiple histories and does have multiple uses and does have multiple reasons that people feel connected to it, multiple different ways that people use it. I mean, that's, for me, that is one of the reasons why the Camp Reserve is such a beautiful site, because you don't have to just like one thing to enjoy being there. You can enjoy it kind of however you would like to. And I don't believe that that what is proposed here is going to take away from people's ability to engage with it and enjoy it in the way that they choose to. I think it's really difficult to speak when people in the audience are speaking, and not very polite either.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm a bit deaf. I didn't hear that, but please, can we keep it down in the gallery?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I cannot, I personally do not feel as though what is proposed will change people's enjoyment of this space, and unless they really, really want it to. I think I spoke about previously when I had it written down and in front of me, when I was feeling as utterly broken by this as I am today. The way that I feel about that space and the way that I feel when I'm there, that does not mean that the way I feel is the only way. And I would never put that onto everyone else. I think we're allowed to think different things about spaces and use them for different things. But the fact remains that this is still an active, it's still an active sports ground. And for the players, particularly women and girls, particularly our young people, they genuinely deserve facilities that meet our current standards. I do not feel that is an unreasonable ask, and I'm so sorry about what this has become, because it feels awful. It really does, and I cannot be the only one sitting here just kind of marveling at the journey that we have been on with this. I know that the journey probably doesn't end tonight, but I really hope we make a decision tonight, because this has been going on long enough and people deserve us to make a decision tonight. Thank you for engaging so well and positively, everyone. And I'm sorry that I couldn't bring as much oomph as I usually do, but this really has just worn me out. I think you know how I feel. I came to that place through listening to a lot of different people, through reading, as we've talked about, just an enormous amount of stuff. I was lucky enough to be here for some of it, which meant that I experienced it in that personal way, and talking to others who were here before, and listening. That's all we can really do. This is our job. We need to make a decision on this planning matter now. But I thank you so much for your attention and your consideration, because it's just been really valuable to listen to you all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Anir. Thank you. So let's make that decision. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour and against, and that's carried. Yes, a division. So all those in favour is Councillors Maltby, Cordy, Anir, Walker, Driscoll and Hayden, and against is Councillors Maddock and Hastwell. Thank you, councillors, for your very considered and eloquent words on this, and a special thanks to Councillor Anir for your leadership on this over the journey. All councillors tonight have expressed a huge range of the kinds of struggles that we've as a group have faced in dealing with this. Excuse me, can we please have some quiet in the gallery? Excuse me, sorry, can we please keep it down? This has been I think Councillor Anir used the word journey, that's one way to describe it. And I think it's been noted that this is the third elected council which has treated on this matter. I held up Councillor Maddock before because I thought that Councillor Maddock was drifting into territory that sort of wasn't really pertinent to the planning application. And that's what this is about. This is a planning application. The master plan was endorsed twice by the previous council and by the previous council. I think the words of Abraham Lincoln ring true here, that you can please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all the time. However, I think that when we look at that northern end that Councillor Maddock drew our attention to under the master plan, the plan does actually provide opportunities to build and develop ways to interpret and explain the history of the site. This planning deals with the sports facilities. There are other developments which will follow, such as the active transport link, which has been mooted. And the treatment of the site will, like this process, will also gather a range of views from the community, I have no doubt. And I think a few councillors have referred to the specialness of the Camp Reserve, and indeed, it's a very different kind of a place, Camp Reserve. It is, as Councillor Maddock pointed out, a very constrained site. There aren't many places to build infrastructure outside of the flood zone. And of course, it's a site with a lot of accumulated history. We've spoken a bit about history tonight, and there's the Gold Commissioners Camp history. But as Councillor Maltby pointed out, there's over 150, 160 years of sporting groups association to the site. For me, fundamentally though, it is actually about not just women and girls, but about the people who grow up in Castlemaine and for whom team sports are so important and so crucial. It's a magnificent place. We love the Camp Reserve, but the facilities are atrocious. And even when I was a kid there in the agricultural show, I remember that the facilities were out of date back then, and that's a long time ago. So I think for those reasons, it is so challenging in that there is, when we think about just the heritage aspects alone of this site, which a number of you have spoken about, there is so much heritage to celebrate at the Camp Reserve. There's so much interesting and particular local Castlemaine heritage. So I know that as councillors have noted, that there's been significant division in the community over this. One thing that I understand, though, from my conversations with different groups and people in the community, from sports users groups to those concerned about heritage protections, is that everyone understands the complexity of and the richness of that heritage. I do think this affords us opportunities to celebrate the heritage of the Camp Reserve. And thanks again, councillors, for all the work on this. It has been Herculean. So moving on to thanks, everyone. And I should also add here that I've focused a lot on the work that we've done as a councillor group on this, which is one kind of hard work, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the extraordinary work of the officers, the executive, the whole of the council organisation, the various contractors who have been commissioned by council to work on this, particularly Callum Murphy, Senior Statutory Planner, Phil Garner, and so many others, but just to acknowledge their extraordinary work on this. So 9.2.1 is the petition I mentioned earlier regarding proposed food organics and garden organics service. I'd ask Councillor Walker to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We've just dealt with one complex issue. We're heading into another one. Council received on 12th of May 2026 a petition from Yes in My Backyard, YIMBY, requesting that Council considers deferring the introduction of proposed curbside food and garden organic service. This is to enable further consideration of the perceived impact of the proposed service to existing home composting practices and community-led composting initiatives, as well as to explore alternative service models within the current state government policy context. This report responds to the request, providing a summary of the matters raised and seeks Council's consideration of the petition and issues identified. So, Mayor, I would move that Council 1 notes that the matters raised in the petition regarding food and garden organics collection and processing will be, addressed in reports provided to Council on the introduction of a 4-stream waste system at a future meeting of Council. 2, notes that a Council officer will advise the lead petitioner of the outcomes of the investigations and meeting of Council. And 3, notes that a community information centre session was held on the 8th of July 2026 to inform and share the proposed FOGO and glass service with interested residents.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Maltby. Councillor Walker, would you like to speak further to your...
Thank you, Mayor. The petition submitted by YIMBY was signed by over 1,000 people from local postcodes. That is very significant. I think in my time here has received the most. The issue does raise several issues for council consideration. As noted, the implementation of food and garden organics is a state legislative requirement. This is a request to delay implementation beyond July 2027 or to seek permission to allow exploration of other alternatives and issues. I won't speak to that at the moment. That will come up in the future. I will simply note that Council is having extensive discussions on this issue, extensive contact with YIMBY and the new organisation, the Mount Alexander Organics Partnership. And certainly there is a lot of interest and sympathy for what is being presented and trying to find the adequate balance within the state legislative requirements. So I would suggest that we accept this petition and we continue to investigate and consult on this issue.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Maltby, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right.
Okay. Any other councillors like to speak to this now? Thanks, Councillor Driscoll.
Thanks, Mayor. I just said the council's curbside FOGO service is not actually intended to replace or compete with home or community composting models such as YIMBY.
Thanks, Councillor Driscoll. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Maltby.
Councillor Walker has described it quite well.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, your right of reply.
Mayor, I think it's something we're pretty on the same page in terms of accepting petitions from residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So all those in favour and against, and that's carried unanimously. And thanks to the petitioners for forwarding this to us 6-8 weeks ago. We've had time to consider this thoroughly, and I underline Councillor Driscoll's comments earlier. So 9.2.2 is Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, the annual plan for 2026-27. Councillor Maddock, can I ask you to introduce this, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And a special thanks to Interim Director for Healthy Communities, Kath Skinner, in bringing this to us, and her team, and also acknowledging the work of Acting Director Rogers leading up to this, and probably most substantively Director Knight in putting together the Wellbeing annual plan. I was meant to read it out, wasn't I, before I started launching into that stuff. The 2025-2029 Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan outlines what Mount Alexander Shire Council will do in partnership with government health and community service organisations over 4 years to protect, promote and improve community health and wellbeing across our shire. The Municipal Health and Wellbeing Plan has been prepared in accordance with the Public Health and Wellbeing Act 2008 and aligns with the Victorian Public Health and Wellbeing Plan 2023 to 27 and the 2025 to 2029 Council Plan. The core foundation of the Municipal Health and Wellbeing Plan addresses social, commercial and economic determinants of health and is informed by local data, evidence and engagement. The purpose of this report is to present the financial year 2026-2027 Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, Annual Plan actions for endorsement by Council. Implementation of these actions will be guided by the Healthy Mount Alexander Alliance, and progress will be reported to Council on a quarterly basis at a future Council meeting. And I move that Council endorses the 2026-2027 Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, Annual Plan. Notes the quarterly 2026-2027 Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, Annual Plan, progress reports. That will be presented at a future meeting of Council. I think I said that all correctly.
Thank you, Councillor Maddock. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hastwell, thank you. Councillor Maddock, would you like to speak further?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Municipal Health and Wellbeing Plan the Municipal Health and Wellbeing Plan provides a shared vision and coordinated strategy for protecting, promoting and improving the health and wellbeing of all residents across the Shire. It responds to community needs, addresses the social, commercial and economic determinants of health and supports the collective action to reduce inequalities and build resilience. Our work is especially vital in this space as our community face many challenges, and the recent active living census revealed some of those challenges to us. 18% of our Shire experienced some level of food insecurity. 27% rated their health as fair or poor. 29% recorded low to moderate life satisfaction. 59% were overweight or obese. 67% reported risky single occasion alcohol consumption, and only 10% met vegetable intake recommendations. Add to this rural disadvantages in accessing education, employment and health services, and the growing inequality and cost of living and housing pressures, it's vitally important that we're working towards the best possible health and wellbeing outcomes for our community. There's a total of 12 actions that have been outlined here. I'll just read 7 of them out in summary. So support for local food relief networks, support JARA-led health and wellbeing initiatives, active transport aspirational mapping community consultation, Mount Alexander Shire heatwave plan, raising awareness within the community of climate change impacts on health, livable Newstead tree establishment, advocacy for funding for safe spaces and support networks of vulnerable communities. Obviously, there's much more that our organisation does in the health and wellbeing space, as is with the partners in this, but just highlighting that I think these are very positive and necessary actions. Of course, there could be more. Perhaps there should be more. That's a budget discussion, but very happy to endorse these actions and see them through. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Maddock. Councillor Hastwell, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any other councillors like to speak about the Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan Annual Plan? Councillor Hastwell.
I reserved my right to have it come straight back at me. So here we go. As mentioned by Councillor Maddock, the 4-year Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan is very much a partnership approach with government, health and community service organisations working together as they should to address priority areas. It's a balanced approach that picks up on each of the priority areas that have been carefully developed to address the social, commercial and economic determinants of health. informed by local data, evidence and engagement. The annual plan for 26-27 is a staged approach as part of the implementation of the 4-year plan. And what we have in this annual plan, as I think Councillor Maddock referred to also, is not an exhaustive list of all that Council will be doing in line with the Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, but it does give a good snapshot of some of the key projects for the current financial year. There are, of course, many other relevant actions that will be undertaken in line with the strategic priorities of the plan, but these are too numerous to detail in this document. In addition to Councillor Maddock's brief overview and listing of the actions for 26-27, I'd like to mention in particular a couple of the actions that tie in very closely with two of Council's overarching considerations. One of the actions for this year, which is very closely tied with the impact of climate change on health and wellbeing, is the heatwave plan. The experience of last summer has heightened awareness across the community and within Council of the risk of bushfire and the potential loss and devastation that this brings, as well as the need to plan for extreme weather events. Heat can be a killer, especially for older people and those with health vulnerabilities. The inclusion of the heatwave plan in this year's annual plan is extremely important, and I'm very keen to see us develop some key actions and to be able to introduce at least some of these in time for next summer. There are models in other shires that we can be looking at, and we should also be exploring the potential for partnerships across the community that can increase the awareness and options for people who may have difficulty accessing cooler spaces in or close to their own homes. Gender equity also continues to be a necessary and important overarching responsibility of our actions and the way that we go about delivering council services and projects. I'm particularly impressed with the detailed gender equity statement in this report that officers have included, and I want to thank those officers responsible for the report. The gender equity statement highlights the importance of equity and place-based focus. We do need services and approaches across the Shire that are available and accessible to all. This includes in the areas of family violence and safety, understanding where there are access and service gaps, responding to intersectionality and universal inclusion. And I'm just going to read out the actions for priority area 6, being preventing all forms of violence. So the projects or the actions for this year in that area are to undertake a coordinated multi-stakeholder approach for programs aimed at young people and their families that promote respectful relationships, positive masculinity, and tools that provide information on preventing and responding to harmful behaviours and abuse facilitated. And I think you'd have to be extremely out of touch in this day to not recognise that this is a growing absolute imperative for our focus. Another action is to advocate for funding for safe spaces and support networks for at-risk groups, including women, LGBTIQA+ people and First Nations communities. The project will be safe spaces and support networks with the outcome of advocacy for funding for safe spaces and support networks for vulnerable community members undertaken. These are really important considerations, and I've just highlighted two, but I do commend the work, as Councillor Maddock has mentioned, of those responsible for the development of the 4-year plan, and also the work that was being undertaken and a careful consideration of priority actions for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hastwell. Councillor Maddock, you have a right of reply.
I'm fine, thank you, Mayor. Cheers.
Okay. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour and opposed, and that's carried. So at 9.3, natural environments, 9.4 infrastructure, and 9.5 well-being economies, we have no officer reports. So we move to 9.6, organisation, and 9.6.1 is the customer charter. Councillor Driscoll, would you introduce this, please?
Yes, Mayor, the customer charter. The purpose of this report is to present to Council the reviewed customer service charter, now retitled the Customer Commitment, for adoption. The new charter, now referred to as the Customer Commitment, sets out how Council will engage with community members and focus its efforts on continually improving the customer experience. It also outlines expectations for how the community will interact with council officers, establishing a shared commitment to working together towards a happy and healthy and connected Shire. Supporting their commitments are the Customer First Framework and its associated annual plan, which outlines Council's long-term goals for delivering on this commitment and the actions that will be taken to achieve them. And Mayor, I'd also like to move that Council adopts the proposed update to Council's Customer Charter, retitled as Customer Commitment.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Would you, Councillor Driscoll, would you like to speak further to your motion?
Yes, Mayor. The existing customer service charter was last refreshed in 2019. While the charter continues to articulate Council's intent on providing respectful and responsive service, it needs an update. Upon an endorsement of the framework, the executive team requested a review and update of the charter to ensure alignment with the new framework. And this is being refreshed, and I'd like to thank not only Director of Corporate Service Julie Landy, but also the Manager of Engagement and Customer Experience, Ed Butler.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Walker, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, Mayor. Just as a follow-up from Councillor Driscoll, the charter changes, updates can be broadly categorised into 4 key areas. First of all, alignment with the Customer First Framework, which is the most significant improvement, is directly aligning the charter with the Customer First Framework, reflecting 5 focus areas: inform, listen, remember, respond and adapt. Secondly, the removal of specific response time measures. The current customer service charter includes specific response time measures. These vary as they relate to means of contact. As part of this review, these response time measures have been removed from the charter, but that does not represent a reduction in Council's commitment to timely service. Thirdly, retitling as Customer Commitment, which is basically a cosmetic change to align with the commitment to the communications and engagement strategy and commit to plain English where possible. And fourth, an expanded community conduct section, which expands somewhat on what Council expects of community interactions and put those expectations in a more prominent place. So in that regard, Mayor, it is an upgrade, bringing things up to where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Hastwell.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that aspect that was just mentioned by Councillor Walker in terms of the removal of specific response time measures. And I've got to say that when this first came to councillors a while ago, I did raise the concern that if we are removing specific response time measures, whether that also meant that there was the potential for less clarity by our customers in terms of when they can expect to hear back. I am assured that that is absolutely not the intention, but really what sits behind this is that because Council has such a lot of complexity, different services, different needs, you can imagine the difference between somebody asking a very straightforward question and then somebody who with a much more complex issue. So it really doesn't work to have an absolute one-size-fits-all measure around how long it takes to be able to respond in a appropriate way. So I just wanted to make that point in case there's anybody else out there who goes, well, hang on a minute, I want to know when I can expect to hear back in relation to my query. I understand that this is a a process that will be undertaken across council, that the different areas of council will be clarifying what is a reasonable time for them to be able to get back across all of these different types of issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Haswell. Thank you. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Maddock.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, aware of a few issues broadly sort of talked about in the community, some being complaints with customer service requests. And I guess, you know, we offer so many services here. It's such a complex organisation. It's very hard to nail every single request and get the information people need. So I've got sympathy for the challenge of our staff, and also that I would say every team in this organisation is working under pretty stringent budget constraints, and that has impacts that follow through. But largely, yeah, very celebratory of the effort of our customer service staff. I'm also aware that the sort of coalface of interactions and some of the negative interactions that we have with members of the community, and that, like in any workplace, exposure to traumatic or vicariously traumatic interactions can have a real health and safety impact. When I first came across the term customer first strategy, I was a little bit worried. It reminded me of training I got in my first job working in a fast food restaurant, and I don't think that was always the most productive. And sort of did a bit of research around it and its strengths and its weaknesses. And I'm glad to see in this policy that we're really sort of speaking to some of the challenges of that by also setting clear expectations for how people interact with our staff. So under the section working together, it's stated that we ask our community to be courteous and respectful towards our staff, councillors, contractors and volunteers, provide accurate and relevant information where possible, understand that we balance individual needs with the responsibilities to the wider community, share feedback to help us improve. And then lastly, that the safety and wellbeing of our staff is priority, and that abusive and aggressive behaviour will not be tolerated. So very happy to see them in there, and I hope that we get some very strong guides around how we implement that. I'm sure we have already. But thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Then Councillor Driscoll, your right of reply.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to point out the upcoming Customer First Action Plan has a series of deliverable actions which aim to improve the customer experience across the board. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favour and against, and that's carried unanimously too. So we move on to 9.6.2, which is the event grants review. Councillor Hastwell, would you please introduce this?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, very happy to do so. And yeah, this is an exciting one, I think, and will mean a lot to quite a number of our local groups. So Mount Alexander Shire Council has a long-standing commitment to build and support a thriving events culture in the Shire. The current event grants program, which began in 2019, is a key means of financially supporting events that bring our community together. The event grants program has been reviewed by council officers who seek to ensure efficient and effective allocation of funds and organisational resources while providing clarity, efficiency and support for event organisers. Effective management of fraud risk through compliance and recommendations of the Victorian Auditor General's Office was also a target outcome of this review. The Venues and Events team consulted with community, event managers and councillors to identify how council can best support the Shire through successful events. And I'd like to move the recommendation as printed, that Council 1 approves the proposed Mount Alexander Shire Council Event Grants Program Guidelines 2026. 2, approves the introduction of 2 $10,000 event grants annually from 27-28. 3, notes that a 2027-28 budget submission will be submitted to increase event grant funding annually by $20,000 to fund the proposed introduction of two $10,000 event grants annually. 4, approves in the instance of unspent grant money from a funding round, the ability of officers in the venues and events team to reallocate unspent money to quick response grants. And 5, adopts the position that funding for events will be provided through the event grants program and not through the budget process. And finally, 6, notes that based on the scale, history and impact of the Castlemaine State Festival, funding of the Castlemaine State Festival is a strategic investment in the local economy, tourism and cultural identity of the Shire, and funding of this investment will be considered during the budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Hastwell. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Maltby. Councillor Hastwell, do you want to speak further to this?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the officers in particular for the broad approach that they've taken to consulting not only with community event managers, but also with councillors to arrive with what is quite a shift in the way the event grants program will be conducted and focused. I think the result is a much more robust set of guidelines that reflects closely the current needs and priorities of event managers and aligns more strongly with the overarching priorities within the council plan, which was developed through broad consultation in 25. Needs include event grant funds are not being exhausted, which means while at the same time the quick response grants has been regularly exhausted. It's been noted also that while most requests for funds to support grants have been going through the events grant process, there have been some which have been going through the annual budget process. This was essentially in relation to larger requests that could be considered within that were larger than could be considered within the existing grants program. We wanted to bring more consistency into this, as well as to understand how some of the larger events needs could be assessed through clear criteria. I think the process of working with councillors to apply the priorities in the council plan to the events grants has been very valuable and has brought a much more considered approach to appreciating the multiple benefits that events can bring across the areas of cultural and community outcomes. Consistency, transparency and equity are always really important, and we will see an added focus to considering the equity across our diverse towns and regions of our Shire when it comes to supporting events. There was also lots of discussion about the pros and cons of council providing support to commercial event managers. This was a quite closely debated aspect. Unless they were local businesses. What we've come to in this new set of guidelines is that criteria are weighted in favour of local partnerships without excluding commercial event organisers. I'm really pleased to see that the opportunity for multi-year funding is being introduced with this new approach. While this is subject to the 27-28 budget process and will only apply to events that meet the rigorous criteria for high performing, it has the potential for greater predictability and longer term planning, which can benefit some of our larger and more complex events. 2, larger grants of up to $10,000 will also be on the table for events that can demonstrate more rigour, including a plan for additional sources, and they will need to also include a plan for additional resources, sources of revenue and support from outside of council. In summary, the applications will continue to be assessed through an objective process by officers and will focus on the following criteria, which I have here in the report. I'll just go through those briefly. So the criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are community connection, participation and township activation, arts, culture and creative sector support, inclusion, equity and accessibility, climate and sustainability outcomes, local economic and visitor outcomes, and local partnerships. So all in all, I think this is a significant development and improvement to providing support in a transparent and consistent way that recognises and supports the community cultural and economic benefits that events, both small and large, new and established, bring to our Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maltby, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right. Councillor Haswell has explained it very well.
Okay. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Walker.
Yes, Mayor, simply, first of all, to endorse Councillor Haswell's comments about how this is a much greatly improved approach to event to the grants process, but to acknowledge the work that Councillor Haswell has done on this, been very engaged with this, and it's a great improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Driscoll.
Two things. One, councillors do not make decisions on whom gets the grants, and two, I'd just like to remind some of the smaller groups within our shire to have a crack at getting these grants, because there's some well-oiled machines out there who keep getting them. So I think other small groups should have a crack. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Driscoll. Councillor Cordy.
Thanks, Mayor. From my perspective, I support grants going to approved not-for-profits. I don't like the idea of public money going directly to for-profit where there's no accountability or trace back. Like a for-profit entity is going to make money out of an event. Well, run a profitable event. That's my advice to them. But anyway, it's a great report we've got it before us, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Maddock.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'll just referring back to some conversations that have happened around this table around getting budget submissions for events, and just recalling how it was a theme that came up time and time again, that many of us felt that we weren't the best placed in this organisation to be making calls on, or maybe not, it's the broader strategic work around what sorts of events get supported or not. So I think this goes a long way to fixing some of those issues and making sure the best decisions are being made. And I've had an email from a constituent who's raised concerns with me around accountability, and particularly around the evidence of spends in these grants. And I just note that in this report, there is a section on reporting and acquittal that does talk about how grants are to be acquitted. But I'd also like to ask on Acting Director Brown, if I could, to clarify how the organisation requests and holds evidence of how these grants are spent. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor, for your question. As you mentioned, we have an acquittal process that's in place, and the current acquittal form is available on our website. It's 6 pages in total, very easily accessible. Part of the process completing the acquittal form is to provide specific detail regarding the funds expended, any funds that are unspent that must be returned to council and what that amount is, a list of the amounts spent and the supplier of each of those amounts, and the total amount expended. We also request copies of receipts as well, and they're held on file as well as part of our record management processes.
Great, thank you. And I hope that will answer my constituents' concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Acting Director. Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors want to comment on this? Councillor Maltby? No? Beg your pardon. Councillor Haswell, in your right of reply.
Thank you. I think we've, between us, covered it well. So thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour and against, and that's carried. And this is really exciting. I mean, the $10,000 grant it means that I think having belonged to plenty of organisations that have not applied for these grants, but probably should, following Councillor Driscoll's encouragement. It really is a huge difference. $3,000 and $5,000 is great. It makes a massive difference to a lot of events. But $10,000, gee, this could be really, really important for all sorts of organisations across the Shire. I'm really excited to see this implemented, and to see the kinds of exciting submissions we're going to get. It's a really important change, and I'm grateful to you all for your comments. I think, as Councillor Hassel said, we've covered that off quite thoroughly. But I think this is an important, small but important reform to our events grant system. And also note that I just want to thank councillors for your speedy and timely responses when we were gathering the councillor feedback was being gathered by the indefatigable Ed Butler, who worked very hard on this, and hats off to you, Ed, and of course to Julie Landy, Director of Corporate Services. And the point that is in the report that I think one of the top concerns for councillors was cultural and community outcomes. That was the theme, preferred over tourism or economic benefits. Not to say that those are not also very important criteria, but I thought it was interesting and emblematic of this group of councillors that we were solidly behind cultural and community outcomes in terms of the events grant. So that brings us to 9.6.3, which is Council Plan 2025-29, Annual Plan for 2026-27. Councillor Maltby, can I ask you to introduce this, please?
Thanks, Mayor. The council, excuse me, the Council Plan 25-29, Annual Plan 26-27 documents the priority actions Mount Alexander Shire Council will undertake in the 26-27 financial year. These actions operational, yeah, that's a good word. The Council Plan 25-29 and support the achievement of its strategic priorities, where an action has alignment with more than one strategic priority. The action has been allocated to the strategic priority it most strongly represents. It is noted that Mount Alexander Shire Council undertakes many projects and initiatives throughout the year to achieve the strategic priorities of the Council Plan. These projects and initiatives are not all included in the Annual Plan. Rather, the Annual Plan aims to highlight new initiatives that strongly align with the strategic priorities of the Council Plan and that are of significant interest to the community. Ongoing monitoring of progress toward the Annual Plan actions will be reported to Council on a quarterly basis. And I would move, 1, that Council endorses the proposed actions of the Council Plan 2025-2029, Annual Plan 2026-2027, and 2, notes quarterly updates on progress against the Council Plan 2025-2029, Annual Plan 2026-2027 will be provided at future meetings of Council.
Thank you, Councillor Maltby. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Councillor Maltby, do you want to speak further to this?
It's very straightforward, and the introduction really explains it. It's just a process that we need to keep following and keep in contact with.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy, you want to speak now or reserve your right? Thank you.
Mayor. Look, the annual plan's got some great initiatives in it. There's all sorts of things from early years plans and community plans, the biodiversity strategy, which is very important, Campbell's Creek environmental drainage improvement. There's a strategy on aquatic facilities, so that's a pretty hot topic. Project that's been around for a while is James Creek Bridge reconstruction or new bridge. There's a raised crossing for Harcourt, so that'll be pretty exciting for Harcourt. Malden Dog Park feasibility study. So lots of things there, and one that I'm interested in particular is the rating strategy, how council generates a rating revenue from its residents, and it's always a pretty hot topic. So look, there's a lot in the annual plan, there's a lot of really good work, but I think the point is not everything's in this annual plan, but plan for success. That's it, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Cordy. Any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Maltby, you have a right of reply.
Councillor Cordy has described it wonderfully.
Thank you. So all those in favour and against, and that's carried. And thank you, councillors. I've lost one. Thank you. 112. Yep. Aged care. Okay. So 9.6.4, aged care quarterly progress update Q3 for financial year 2025-26. Councillor Maddock, can I ask you please to introduce this?
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. Just bear with me 2 secs. Okay, Community Wellbeing's aged care report. Am I in the right section? Yep. Q3 for the financial year of 2025-2026 highlights that council's aged care services continue to operate in a complex and evolving environment, primarily funded through the Commonwealth Home Support Program, with funding secured to 30 of June 2027, alongside Veterans Home Care to September 2027, home and community care for younger people, ongoing, and Care Finder. Services are also delivered to support at-home clients with service contracts. And it's quite a large summary, so I'll just paraphrase. Demand continues to exceed capacity, with approximately 450 clients waitlisted through my aged care with our council. Service data indicates increasing client complexity, particularly in falls, cognition, and clinical presentations. Council is renewing registration under categories 1 to 4. Council will not at this stage seek support at home registration or category 5. Overall, council is making steady and measurable progress in reform readiness while continuing to manage high change, financial and regulatory risk in a complex sector environment. Recommendation, so I'll move that council notes the aged care quarterly progress update Q3 2025-2026.
Thank you, Councillor Maddock. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Councillor Maltby, thank you. Councillor Maddock, do you want to speak further to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And firstly, to thank Interim Director for Healthy Communities, Kath Skinner, Responsible Officer, Rosalie Rogers, and Strategy and Compliance Coordinator, Peter Woolard, and probably should extend thanks to Rosalie Rogers as the previous acting director and Director Knight for her work in this. I think that the work in this area is incredible, and it blows my mind every time I dive into this. And occasionally sitting on the clinical governance committee, I get to do that every now and then. Just picking a few things out of this. In this report, we've had 162 client assessments and reviews completed. Noting that the number of OH&S assessments has increased compared to last quarter, and this is primarily due to the assessments done around the bushfire response in Harcourt. Demand continues to exceed capacity, with approximately 450 clients waitlisted through my aged care. Delays in aged care assessments and support plan reviews continue to impact timely access to care across the region. Overall, the total number of overdue client reviews has decreased as the team continue to focus on addressing client reviews. A small decrease in complaints is noted, which is, I think it's always a good thing. And overall, council is making steady and measurable progress in reform readiness while continuing to manage high change, financial and regulatory risk in a complex sector environment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maddock. Councillor Maltby, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll just make a couple of comments. Mount Alexander Shire Council is one of the few left in the state of Victoria doing aged care. And it's very important to our community that we continue to do that. And the previous council made a decision in 2020, I think, or something like that, to continue, which is important, as I just said.
Thank you, Councillor Maltby. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Then Councillor Maddock, you have the right of reply.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really reiterating what Councillor Maltby has said. I think it's so important. These services are so important to our community, and especially as we have an or a larger representation of older people compared to the state, and that's only expected to grow. And I guess given the tyranny of distance between us and many services, to leave them to the whims of the private market and what that delivers presents quite a big risk. Having them delivered by council delivers a degree of surety in that which may not be there otherwise. So I'm really happy with the decision to stay in. I think the whole sector is very challenged at the moment by the rollout of the new legislation, and we're waiting and hoping that resolves quickly. But yeah, really appreciate, and that makes it a difficult work environment for that team, puts management under a lot of pressure, and I really appreciate the degree of work and stress and passion in that area, and just what that delivers for our constituents. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. So all those in favour and against, and that's carried. And to echo Councillor Maddock's point and Councillor Maltby's point that around 1,000 people signed up for aged care in the Shire, and that's about 5% of the population. That's a significant chunk of Mount Alexander Shire's population who are signed up with council's aged care services. And just to again thank Rosalie Rogers, Manager of Community Wellbeing, for the enormous amount of work she does in this, and for the carriage that the carriage of this policy over years. We really are indebted to Rosalie for her forensic knowledge of this kind of a seemingly Byzantine level of complexity, and the kinds of changes that we are seeing from the federal government as they try and shape this policy, while we have to keep delivering services. It is a great testament to the skill and the hard work of management, executive officers, and all staff at this organisation that we can bring this report before the council table. So thank you, councillors. Okay, so that's the end of officer reports. So we move on to delegates reports. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. 4 events, they're all forthcoming. First one's just me. This Thursday I'll be doing emergency management liaison officer training for working in incident control centres during natural disasters. Seems like the logical next step, given my basic experience. Secondly, this Saturday night is the event of the year. I don't care what others say. Chewton Community Bushfire at the Chewton CFA, raising funds for Chewton Pool, starts at 5:30. Bonfire. What did I say? Bushfire. Oh, no. Bonfire. Sorry. Bonfire. I'm trying to be fast. Very reasonably priced, $15 an adult, $25 a family, gets you a meal, live music, there'll be children's games, there'll be a tug of war, the fire trucks will be out, so thoroughly recommend that. Saturday, 1st of August, now neighbouring town of Bendigo is holding its first ever Africa Fest. Hargraves Mall, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. There will be live music, there will be food, there'll be a fashion parade. They're trying to talk my partner into being part of that, but I think she's successfully resisting. That'll be a lot of fun. And finally, I remind people, Tuesday, 11th of August is census night. People, please fill in your census. Sometimes governments might seem bureaucratic, but the data is really important for this council and other tiers of government in their planning. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. That's very exciting. And that's this Saturday, is it? The bonfire? This Saturday. And where is it again? At the CFA?
Chewton CFA,
Yeah.
starting at 5:30.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Hastwell.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Walker. I think you've got us almost kind of energised again, and ready to head out there. And nice to hear, one of the themes of tonight in terms of events and how important they are, and the enthusiasm that they gather. I just had a couple of things I wanted to briefly mention. My listening post at Malden Market the other weekend. Thanks to everyone who dropped by. It was fantastic over a period of 2 hours to engage with community members across a whole range of issues of importance to them. But also what I particularly noticed this time was it wasn't just issues of importance that were coming through to me. There were multiple community members who were really excited about the community planning efforts that they are already engaged in. Of course, that is one of the areas that aligns with the action plan for the council plan this year. So fabulous to see the community coming together, and more diverse people in that shire, in that ward at the moment that I'm seeing really jumping up and contributing to bigger picture community items. I also just I meant to mention when I was doing the acknowledgement earlier this evening about the passing of Chris Meadows Taylor, that I also attended a memorial for Chris that was held in Maryborough at the Maryborough Town Hall. It was packed, it was extraordinary, it was inspiring, and really a wonderful program of tributes that were put together by Chris's partner Frank, and shared by and with a wide array of community, family, political and professional colleagues. It really is great to be reminded of the impact that councillors can have, and Chris certainly was a model in many ways of the way of community service and unrelenting commitment to ideas, issues, opportunities that he saw as being vital for the future of that shire. And lastly, I'm going to do a little event thing as well. This is not a spruik. This is just to say that Malden in winter, and particularly the Malden Great Teddy Bear Adventure on the 11th of July, which was really quite extraordinary. There were, I don't know, thousands of teddy bears, and there's still some around in shop windows, in the streets. There were children exchanging their old bears for new bears. I don't think it's appropriate to question whether that's, an okay thing to do, to trade in your old bear and grab a new one. But really families, children had a fantastic time, and an inspired event by, again, community organisers putting in an amazing amount of voluntary time. The whole event was free, supported by a Mount Alexander Shire quick response grant of $500, and also supported by enormous community effort. So I just wanted to really shout out to the organisers and everyone who was involved in that event. Great example of a new event, a small event targeting families, bringing a different audience from actually across the region and beyond. There were people travelling with their teddies from a very long distance. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Haspel. And I heard that, yeah, they did travel some people a very long distance with their teddies.
Yes.
Councillor Maddock, do you have a delegates report?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Went to a lot of community lunches this month, which has been fantastic. I was at the Harcourt last week and couldn't get a seat. It was so popular, and the food was great. It's clearly a very vibrant and well appreciated thing that's happening out there. Also attended the there's a new soup kitchen that's running on a Wednesday night at the Salvation Army, which just seems like a great initiative. It's linking the growers and sellers at the farmers market, utilising their unsold produce, turning it into soup and handing it away for a donation at the Salvation Army. And they advertise that everyone's welcome to that. And it's a really great, warm, inclusive environment there. Attended the farewell for Darren Fazard, which is, yeah, look, it's wonderful to see the level of support and appreciation and respect for him. I've only been in this organisation for, for a tiny part of what he has, so I get a view on a deeper view on his role here, and I think he'll be very missed. Had the honour of attending the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly with the Mayor and Acting CEO, soon to be CEO. Oh, you are CEO. You were acting back then. Were you? Oh, director. Oh, okay. Look, I think what I love most about this, and this is not everyone's cup of tea, but it's the motions that are put forward by councils. I think there were 240 of them, so it's an incredible amount of sort of ideas and policies, and I like spending the time with it and getting you kind of get a sense for what the country is buzzing with at the moment. And it's different, like this year was different from last year. The issues that are front of mind are different, and it's just really interesting to get a handle on that. And one of my favorite things is spending time with those policies, and I put a lot of work in leading into that to look at them against our council policies, to basically make recommendations to our mayor, who held the vote, as to what I think fitted really strongly with our council policies. And I'll just read out a couple, or maybe a bit more than a couple, which I put forwards as being that I thought were really important to our community, which is to support community-led housing innovation, increase public housing investment in rural and regional Australia, controls to give residents better access to insurance products in the face of increased risk due to climate change, voluntary home purchase, or ability for voluntary home purchase and house raising initiatives for dwellings in high risk and flood zones, catchment restoration that ensures safe, reliable water supplies, healthy rivers and coastal systems, investment in to deliver the National Feral Deer Action Plan. I'm going to skip ahead because they're sort of categorised. Greater support for early childhood education and care sector, ongoing funding program for local government that supports community and enabling infrastructure, and support and upgrade of council-owned public swimming and aquatic facilities. There's also one in there about regional sporting facilities as well. I'd say most of them were quite aligned with our policies, and I really appreciated the debates on the floor and talking with councillors from across the country leading up to that, to debate the merits of these motions. I was able to propose and have one amendment accepted, which I was really happy, which saw a call for increased funding for our pensioners, to also include an increased call for low-income concession card holders, which was consistent with the decision that was made in our budget earlier this year. I think there was also 3 motions that our council brought, and I'm happy that all of them got up in some form, and maybe I'll let the mayor speak to them unless you want me to speak to them. I'll just summarise them. I'm not going to speak because they came to a previous meeting, which was advocating for the delivery of more social and affordable houses in rural areas, a national campaign to strengthen volunteering, advocacy for shade for our active transport projects. And then just lastly, I'm aware that many of our local public school teachers will be on strike on Thursday after their second proposed EBA was voted down by the teachers and members of the Australian Education Union. While my family and child will be impacted by this strike, I wholeheartedly thank our striking teachers for fighting for better conditions for our children and our public schools. Because importantly, teachers' working conditions are also our children's learning conditions. It's a travesty that the Allen Labor government seek to squeeze our teachers through the process.
Councillor, it's not really the business of we don't run schools. This probably falls into, if you could just be concise with your comments about this, please.
Sure. I thought the purpose of the delegates' reports was interpreted by the councillor, but I've only got a sentence or two left to go. While this process, while purposely delaying at least $2.4 billion in funding for public schools, our teachers are the lowest paid in the country and currently doing an average of 12 hours unpaid overtime every week. There is no wonder that there are staffing shortages in our... I'm sorry, how many kids do we have in public schools in our shire? These are our constituents, and these issues directly affect the kids in our shire.
I think then you find a place in the Victorian Parliament if you want to prosecute these arguments in the council chamber at a council meeting. I think we get the point that you support the striking teachers. Thank you. ALGA was really interesting, and for me, and thanks Councillor Maddock for fleshing out the value of Australian Local Government Association. One of the things that I really like, it's kind of the only conference that we go to regularly, this shire, and I think it's important that for me, and to demonstrate, I think, the value of a meeting like ALGA was a chance for me to meet with about 22 mayors and CEOs on their experiences of how they've dealt with changes to their various states' waste laws, and particularly FOGO and glass and all the issues that we've been facing in this shire. And I was lucky to attend with councillors Maddock and Driscoll and Anir, and of course our CEO, who presented the community community information session on proposed or potential changes to the waste services. So for me, that point, and all of the topics that Councillor Maddock raised, I think are important topics, and I'm not to discount them. But on waste, the value for me of ALGA was to have one-on-one conversations with other representatives from around the country on pitfalls, on problems, on successes, on ways that we can do better when it comes to managing waste, on reducing, reusing and recycling. And there's really no other conference I can think of where you get that opportunity, where someone is afforded that chance to talk with such a wide range of people from councils, both sort of similar demographically to our council, but also those that are very different to our council. The Community Waste Reference Group is meeting more frequently now as the organisation here is so exercised with thinking about how we respond to the Circular Economy Act, and how and if we introduce more waste services. And that's just one slice of ALGA for me, but it was so valuable. I learned so much, and it gave me so many good references to follow up. And we were lucky, most of us, I think all of us were lucky to attend JARA up in Golden Square, and to get a briefing from some JARA leaders about the treaty process. And this is important, as we know, the JARA, Djadjawarrung people, the JARA community and that organisation is the first of those organisations in Victoria to sign a local treaty with the state government. So it's really interesting. I'm indebted to Cooper and those guys up there for the information they gave us and the generosity then. And just quickly following on from Councillor Hastwell, if you're out there listening and you want to bail up the mayor, I've got listening post this Thursday afternoon at the supermarkets. You'll find me there with a sandwich board. Chief, anything from you?
Thank you, Mayor. Given it's the end of my second day and it's been quite a long meeting, I might just be very brief, Mayor. Just to say that I'm really looking forward to working with all of the councillors and with yourself, Mayor, as well as leading the organisation and this great group of people we have that work for council here. There's amazing people at every level that do a lot of work within our community, and their heart is really in it to work with our community in partnership and to work to see how we can all work collectively across our shire to deliver outcomes that support all of our people across all of the needs and help them make connections where we can. So really looking forward to that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. So on to item 11, we have notices of motion. Can I ask Councillor Hastwell to introduce this, please? And this is one that we deferred because Councillor Hastwell was not here last time. So I think it's important that you introduce this, Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to my fellow councillors also for your decision to defer as I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. So this motion is water standpipes, review of number, location and accessibility of standpipes in Mount Alexander Shire. And as a little bit of context, the water standpipe sorry, it's getting very late in the evening, but we'll get through this. So as some of the context, water standpipes provide an accessible source of water during emergency situations, including fire events. They also supply properties that are not connected to mains water and therefore require an additional water source during dry conditions. The main requirement is tanker access for household use, while fire tanker filling should also needs to have backup power. With the impacts of climate change, increased fire risk and more frequent drought conditions, water standpipes provide vital infrastructure for communities across central Victoria, including in our shire. For the purposes of filling tanks for firefighting, all standpipes need to be connected to backup power. A standpipe that was previously located at Harcourt, adjacent to Barker's Creek Reservoir, is a priority for reinstatement. The main requirement is tanker access for household use. In other words, potable water. Currently, there are only 3 standpipes providing potable water within Mount Alexander Shire. These are owned and operated by Colaban Water and are located at Newstead, Maldon and Taradale. Issues associated, sorry, I won't read all of the rest of the context. There's quite a bit of context there. But I might just then move on to the motion itself. I move that Council directs the Chief Executive Officer to write to commit to reinstate, relocate and install additional standpipes as identified by the review to the Managing Director of Colaban Water, requesting 1, reinstatement of a standpipe in Harcourt as soon as practicable, 2, relocation of the Maldon standpipe away from direct proximity to residences and community recreation space, 3, a review of the number, location and efficiency of standpipes in the Shire, providing raw, recycled and potable water, including identification of at least 2 additional standpipe installations to be undertaken in consultation with Council as soon as practicable in order to inform Colaban Water's next program of works and Colaban Water ESC price submission. And finally, 4, a budget commitment to reinstate, relocate and install additional standpipes as identified by the review to be included in Colaban Water's next program of works and Colaban Water ESC price submission that applies from 2028. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Haswell. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Cordy. Do you want to speak further to this, Councillor Haswell?
No, I won't at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Cordy, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'll speak now. Mayor, look, Councillor Haswell has done a fantastic job putting this notice of motion together. You know, over the journey, I've had many phone calls complaining of the removal of the standpipe at Harcourt. It means in summer periods when drinking water's in short supply, carriers have to go to Kangaroo Flat, Malden or Taradale to replenish their tankers, and it all comes at a cost to the customers. But also, just briefly, in terms of emergency services, I know there's other work underway in regards to emergency water for firefighting following the Harcourt fires, but it's a critical importance, and the point there just covered briefly by Councillor Haswell that emergency water needs to have backup power supply, because the first thing that happens in the fire is the power goes out, so there's no water for anybody. And yeah, look, what we found in the Harcourt fires was even the best prepared properties were still in a lot of trouble on such a bad day. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Walker.
I'm just very briefly endorsing what Councillor Cordy said about emergency services, and while we appreciate the recent rain, everything's indicating we're going into a hell of a El Nino, probably the worst ever recorded, and these sorts of things the CFA really will need them. Let's hope we don't, but we've got a plan that we will.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Haswell, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Cordy and Councillor Walker, for your comments. I think that the Ravenswood Harcourt fire has certainly sharpened our awareness of the reality of the impact of bushfires and the long-lasting damage. I think that we've seen that at every level, from individuals to community to levels of government, we've been prompted to look closely at whether we are doing things as well as we can. And I think this is one piece of that jigsaw. I wanted to also thank community members in Tarrangower who brought this, in the Tarrangower ward that is, who brought this to my attention, and also, of course, acknowledge those community members who have raised it with Councillor Cordy. I wanted to also thank the support of other councillors, and again, in particular to Councillor Tony Cordy, whose deep understanding from his own experience and his connection with the rural and farming community of our shire is invaluable in some of these aspects. And I hope that other councillors will support this motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haswell. Thanks, councillors. Okay, so all those in favour and against, and that's carried unanimously. So we have no urgent special business, but we do have an item at 13 under confidential items. Councillor Maltby, would you please introduce this?
I move the council closes the ordinary meeting of council 21 July in accordance with section 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020 in order to consider confidential information.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. All those in favour and against. And so before I declare the meeting closed, I just wanted to give a big warm welcome to our interim Director of Development and Infrastructure, Anthony Petherbridge. Welcome aboard, Anthony. So at, was it 17 minutes past 9, we'll close the meeting and get on with the confidential item. Thank you.